Hello. Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us here, those who are face to face here, as well as those who are following us by our streaming platform. This is another session that we have within our seminar, the ones that has been organized this year by Organización Libre de Enseñanza. In this case, we're dealing with the topic of politics and communication. And today we're going to tackle a topic that I consider to be fascinating and is really capturing the attention of all of us here, which is the issue of artificial intelligence. Our idea, because this is something that has been discussed previously, the three of us together, is to get to know what we mean when we talk about AI, because a lot of people talk about AI, but it's hard to know what we're talking about when we use this name, artificial intelligence. And afterwards, we'll talk about artificial intelligence, power, capitalism, and democracy, or possible disruptions that can be happening within our democratic systems. And to do that, we have a wonderful cast here. We're having two experts on the field. To the right, for those who cannot see the name, is Marta Peirano, probably known by all of you, more specifically because of her ongoing presence in Radio Nacional de España, the Spanish national radio, and the articles that she published in El País newspaper. Although she does many activities, she's a person who is constantly traveling around the world. So it's a global person. She's a journalist by training, specializes in all the thing that is related not only with new technologies, but other aspects that are related to cybersecurity or capitalism and climate crisis and all the problems that can produce in terms of privacy and the new forms of powers that appears as a consequence of all of this. She's also the author of several books with titles that makes us want to buy them immediately, like The Enemy Knows the System Against the Future. And my favorite title is The Small Red Book of the Activist on the Network, on the web. Thank you, Marta. I know you are highly demanded, and therefore it is a pleasure to have you here with all of us. And then we have a different profile, the one of Elena Yndurain. Elena is a person with an overwhelming CV. I'm only going to be able to mention a few small things, otherwise we'll be wasting here 15 minutes at least, finding out about all the places she's been working and all the things that she studied. She has a double degree, mathematics and IT. She has done postgraduate studies at the MIT and Harvard, telematic engineering. She's a teacher at Instituto de Empresa and also at Universidad Carlos III. She's a teacher and a researcher over there. She's worked for Microsoft in the United States, for IBM, and for other multinational companies in the technological field. She might tell us later on what she likes best and the things that she wants to do when she grows up, because as you can see, she's very young still. So thank you very much, Elena. I know that you're also very busy, and I love to have you here with all of us. So let's get into the topic. And I was saying at the very beginning, when we talk about AI, artificial intelligence, what are we talking about? That's the first thing that we want to find out. What can you say, Elena? As a technologies, how will you say a layperson what this is? Because we all got into ChatGPT, but what's behind this? Well, ChatGPT is what we call the killer app. It's the app that give access to the masses the use of a technology, in this case artificial intelligence, which is the single topic. No matter where I go, everyone's talking about AI. We've moved from using in artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is part of the many systems that we're using now, to hear it as it was something new. At the end of the day, artificial intelligence is a system that has a certain logic, and it's capable of reasoning like a person. And this could be a software digital system, or it can be a hardware, a robot actually. And that's how I would explain it in very simple words. And ChatGPT is within artificial intelligence and specific applications whose main characteristic is that we can interact with it in a natural way with the interface that is a natural user. It is like a conversational app through text, and it generates answer. That's what is called the generative artificial intelligence. So it generates new model. It is trained to give us some results. Results can come in many different formats. It could come in text, images, video, and I think that the big success of it is that it is very easy to use. How would you define it, Marta? Well, since we have here Elena, who knows much more than I do, and she knows very well how AI is developed. What I'm going to do is the opposite, and I'm going to talk about what it is not. And I want to quote Kate Trafford, who's also worked as a researcher in Microsoft, and she always says that AI, or at least this model of AI in which that we're all talking about, Chat GPT, based on neural networks, etc., is neither intelligent nor artificial. And this is a provocation that she uses to explain that it is highly dependent on, first of all, materials that are non-artificial, such as, for example, the materials that they get from mines, such as lithium, nickel, all kinds of rare ores and minerals that come with a very manual work and non-artificial for the extraction and the processing, and it depends on non-artificial materials such as water, all these rare ores, and the muscle and the sweat of the people working in these areas. But it also requires the cognitive work, not only of the people working in the Centers for the Moderation of AI that keeps on correcting AI models that we're using, such as ChatGPT and all of the models that we have right now in the market, so they won't say anything stupid or anything outrageous, things that we don't want them to read or see, but also the cognitive effort that we've made uploading all the contents that we've uploaded in the last 20 years on the internet, in the web 2.0, in our blogs, in Facebook, in Instagram, in Twitter, in our debates, in Reddit, in the comments that we've posted in media, and also in the YouTube videos, in the podcasts, in the radio programs, all of this intelligence that we've uploaded with our own cognitive effort, it's being used in order to train artificial intelligence models. And that's the reason why Kate says that it is neither intelligence nor artificial. Yeah, thank you very much. Well, you've put on the table a topic that I believe to be fundamental and that we should have put on the table from the very beginning, which is the one of, or answers the question of who is in charge of controlling that data, who is in charge of acquiring the information, how the information is acquired, because I'm assuming that no one is asking for permission to anyone, literally. I mean, this is information that's on the web and it's being absorbed, and linked to this, a problem that I consider that from my perspective as a politologist, I consider it to be fundamental, is whomever has that technology are a few large corporations, maybe a state, China, if I'm not wrong, I might be wrong, and therefore The big question, a question that we always need to ask ourselves is who's in control? Who's in control of the controllers? This is a topic that I consider to be fascinating and is happening today for first time. We can know what people think, what people feel, what are their preferences without them saying it, without them needing to say it. We have stopped being a black box now through our digital footprint or our digital footprint. We can learn about the life of the person, their thoughts, their taste, and that comes with a very commercial dimension, but also can have a very political dimension. Do you ever wonder these type of things, Elena, when you design or when you incorporate these materials for these new technologies? Do you wonder, or you just take it just for the mere sake of the fact that you can take it, at least you were taking water from a river? There is one important topic that you both have mentioned, where the data come from. There is another important issue, because if we think of an algorithm for artificial intelligence, there is an input data that helps a system to be trained and learns, and it creates model that provides results. For example, in the COVID, we saw all something that was very simple, whether if you were suffering COVID or not. There is a table of artificial intelligence that, based on the parameters, will tell you if it was working or not. But it was not working very well. There were a lot of false positives. But the topic that you're talking about has to do with biases. Data can come with bias, and the algorithm can be bias itself. Algorithm is the black box that you mentioned. So we really know the inputs, more or less the inputs, not 100% of them. But how things are developed depends on the developer, actually, and then there will be an output, a result. And what is clear is that artificial intelligence, these type of algorithms, come with biases, and there have been many problems, bias based on race, gender, etc. I remember that Microsoft had an anecdote, quite fun to a certain extent. It depends on how you look at it, but it reflected the content that was available on the web. They launched a chat box through Twitter, now X, and that chatbot started learning from the contents that they saw, and they started interacting. Maybe you have to explain what a chatbot is, because most of the people here, not the ones at the back, but those that are closer to us, are all non-very techy. The chat box is an interaction system. You ask a question and they give you an answer. It's a robot for chatting. But maybe we have to ask before, how many here have used ChatGPT? We're having people up there full of very young people who've all used ChatGPT. But chatbot is ChatGPT. That's what it is. Like, the main description is that it's a virtual assistant with whom you can chat. Go ahead, Elena, because we interrupted you and we already know what a chatbot it is. And now that this has been clarified, and chatbot is more intelligent because it answers very simpler. But this one got contents from Twitter and they gave an answer. And since it was not supervised, and that's very important in the world of artificial intelligence, there are algorithms that are supervised and those who are unsupervised. In the supervised one, there is a person verifying the results. Sometimes you probably notice, I don't know if you've noticed, but when you are formulating a question in a call center, they tell you, did you like the answer? And you can go with a thumbs up or thumbs down. That's training the system. It's a way of supervising this type of answers. But there is also human and technical supervision that can be applied. And this chatbot, this Twitter that was a robot, became xenophobic, racist, etc. And they had to take it out. They have to cancel it. That was the first experience that they have. Left on their own, unsupervised, and Microsoft realized that they had to change how they were doing things. Not so much how they were doing things, but how how this was taken into the market, how a product of artificial intelligence can be taken into the market, because that's the complexity. You have to test it, verify it, and then you have to release it and supervise it. Some people believe that when you launch ChatGPT, even those who are on top there, ChatGPT needs to be trained, because sometimes people say, no, the answer that it gave me, it was not very good, because you have to train it. You have to tell them what you're looking for, and you have to give them certain guidance. You have to add content to it. So to a certain extent, you're doing that part of training. And in order to answer your question with regards to the bias, where do data come from? Now we're starting to see a certain regulation pass on artificial intelligence, because we realized what's the problem. The problem was already there. It's not a new problem. What I'm not so clear about is how good is going to come up this regulation, because at geographical level, each country has a different model. And we're in the hands of the developers as well. Also, this needs to be taken into consideration, the big techs. I love Elena mentioning this example of Microsoft chatbot. First, because it was the moment in Twitter where we were all looking at what was going on there. And it happened like in 48 hours. They announced the chatbot, and they say, we have a chatbot in Twitter, learn from the Twitter contents, and in 48 hours it had become a Nazi. So every time I think about this idea of the people who are in their offices in different parts of the world controlling what ChatGPT is saying, I keep on thinking about this Microsoft chatbot that in 48 hours became a Nazi, because obviously it's very difficult to supervise these type of things. And one of the things that we've seen with regards to the data that we use in order to train, and I say we train, but I'm not doing it myself, but these large corporations such as OpenAI, Google, and Microsoft are doing to train these AI models, they have the theory that the more the content that is available for the training, the more intelligent they are. There is a concept that's called emergence that probably Elena can explain better than I do. And the concept is that at a certain scale, if you can put the world inside the head of these neural networks, intelligence is going to come up in a natural way. And in the race for having more and more intelligent models, they were saying in New York Times a couple of weeks ago that OpenAI has finished all the English language contents on the web. They've taken absolutely 100% of the available contents on the web to train ChatGPT, and they have run out of English contents. And what they started to do half a year ago was to create a program that's called Whisper, and what it does is to change the audio contents on the web, not the written ones, because ChatGPT is a language model, so therefore it works with language. So they were converting YouTube videos, podcasts, radio programs, the one of Radio Televisión Española that were available on the web. They have transfer them into text to be able to continue on feeding the ChatGPT model. I don't know which ones they are on the 4.5 or 5 ChatGPT. And one of the things that they were explaining is that Google, who is the owner of YouTube, they knew that they were doing that, even though the terms and conditions or the rules of YouTube forbid this. And they were not saying that anything because they're doing the same thing on everyone else's platform. So they're all gathering contents, all contents available, and using them, packaging them, and using them in order to train the models. And the problem that arises from this is that they neither have the capacity nor the hands, not the desire to see what's inside before using it. So, for example, there is package that's called Lion 5B that was used by practically all of the platforms to feed their models, and it just so happened that it has at least 1,000 images of child abuse. And they took it because they were on the web, they were available, and they caught it, they grabbed it, and they were absorbed by the big vacuum cleaner that these companies have, and they use it for training the models. So it seems like now we're starting to think about what capacity do we have in order to curate or to verify what's inside of these training packages, so the models will not only use bad biases that we have in all environments and contents, but also the worst possible aspects of humanity and of the internet. None of you have answered the question, because one of the questions that I asked, and I know it's hard to answer them all, was that this is in the hands of a few. And the big question is it possible to make it a bit more democratic, in quotes? Because ChatGPT, of course, is open to the use of everyone, but since we don't know who's the ghost in the machine, who's inside controlling what we're being told or the way in which we're being told those things, and we go back to the issue of the algorithm, and that's a different perspective. Is there a way of getting the knowledge that can be taken advantage of to satisfy economic or political specific interest and being able to have an influence in the opinion of certain sectors of the population? When this is open, like in a free market competition system, things tend to balance, although the market is never balanced, but we can tend to a certain balance. But when this is in the hands of what, five companies, even less, even Google doesn't seem to be jumping into this. And nations are using it in a supervising way. So that's the question of the power behind AI. In whose hands is it, and what capacity do they have in order to control the population without being subject to any political responsibility? Because Ars media want to control power. We are the fourth power. This is the difference between the old democratic system, where we had the press and the media exerting their check and balances activity. And this is a topic that it is absolutely fascinating. Those who don't really know how things work don't know how to evaluate things. What I think is complicated with regards to who's controlling things, let's imagine what we need to control is how things are designed, the guts of the algorithms to verify that the response that is given are not given in order to manipulate. And Google, Microsoft, the big providers have to be accountable on how the algorithm is made before being able to release it. And this is what's being seen in the regulation. And with regards to the part of software development, there is a great debate. And companies are already working on the accountability of AI algorithms. And by the way, I wish they would have done so with the social media, because what a mess do we have in the social media. And hopefully these type of corporations, they've learned beforehand. And I think this needs to be done in a private-public partnership. Definitely the European Union is trying to regulate this. So does the United States and China, each one of them with a different approach. And corporations have changed a great deal the way they develop things, because they have included the part of accountability or responsibility on the things that you're doing, trying to have less manipulation, so that this is not part of the algorithm. But as Marta was saying, you can get rid of the algorithm in the manipulation, but in the data that they're using, the data is misleading or bad, the data is being used. And if garbage comes in and garbage is the input, the output is going to be garbage as well. I totally agree with what Elena just said. And most of the problem that we're having now in that we're inheriting from the social media, because the model that we call right now of artificial intelligence is a model that we inherit from the digital platform that have been dominant in the last 20 years, not only in the field of technology but in telecommunications in general. And in this case there is a double opacity, because on one hand they are very opaque companies. They always said, and this is an absolute lie, but they always said that the United States invents, China copies, and EU regulates. We have been producing certain generations that afterwards have been transposed into the rest of the world, such as GDPR, which is the data privacy regulation that has become the benchmark. So anywhere when you want to protect privacy of the users, they've copied GDPR. But what happens to GDPR when you don't have access to the servers where data is being processed is hard to implement. It's like wanting to control a highway with a lot of regulations, speed, etc., but it's covered by a tunnel and you can never get into this highway. So what do? You press your ear to the highway to find out if someone is running really fast or not and trying to guess who is it. In this level of opacity, we're having a lot of difficulties when monitoring what's going on, and secondly, when trying to impose your regulations. And this is a problem that we've inherited from the social media, which carried out operations in Europe that do not abide by the European regulation. And we know that, but they do so in such a dark manner that we don't have the muscle to implement the law or appropriately to enforce the law. We don't have that possibility. But also this AI model is based on neural network, that it's a very specific model of development. And we have like two parallel models for the development of AI, historically at least, just to talk in very general terms. One has to do with training a system with norms and rules. Every time you see a car, you have to stop. Every time you see a dog, you bark. You apply certain rules, and then you train it with the example. These are all the cars, these are all the dogs, these are this and that. So when you train this type of AI models with all the things that are available on the internet, you're not giving this the rules of the game. You're telling them, this is how we play, and you'll see what you understand out of this. So the company that it is doing the training doesn't know very well what the model is learning. We know what we're using to feed the model, and we know how to correct things after, but what's happening in between, to make it a bit more anthropomorphic, is that we don't know what's going on in their head. They don't know what rules they're inferring from this training. So there's double opacity. On one hand, opacity to us of the companies, even OpenAI. OpenAI, but nothing's open. Everything is strictly protected by cryptography, data centers surrounded by barbed wire and machine guns, and at the same time the internal opacity of not knowing what ChatGPT is going to do, because we don't know what ChatGPT has learned, and that makes things really complicated. All of a sudden we already have an AI regulation, but let's see how can we implement it, having these two main problems on the table. And the issue that everyone is fearing, that within the development of AI, not only the gathering of data and the possibility of being able to use it for ugly purposes, do you see that it could be possible that see a quantitative leap so that the system can dominate the creator? This Terminator syndrome. You're laughing because maybe you think that this is a very naive question, but that's what people, it's wondering. Could this become independent from the creator? Can we have the Terminator syndrome happening, or are there technological mechanisms that will prevent this from happening? it's already gone independent. It's already gone out of control to a certain extent. When you're on a website and they start telling you about the cookies and the data and wherever, those pieces of information, they're already in the hands of the companies. So that part is already out of control, and the companies are already using. But what we're talking is about the machine using them themselves without control of the company. So it will overcome everything. So it becomes aware of itself, and from a certain moment they start not reacting to the programmer's desires, but going on their own. Right now, you program things, but the machine keeps on learning, and unless you supervise it, it can go rogue. Definitely, if you don't supervise it, the machine is going to be learning, and the models that are created, they learn from a series of information. They can have everything under control. If you let everything be automated, you can end up being in the hands of AI. If that's your fear, it's true that it's something that could be happening. But can they differentiate, or can they know what power is? How can not only they can manipulate, but they can exert their own will, their independent will, like in Odyssey 2001. I don't know. I'm getting into the field of science fiction, but it is a question that everyone's wondering right now. And there is one of the laws of robotics that said that AI should not hurt humans, and the question is valid, but it depends who's the developer. One of the fears that we have nowadays, good technology in the wrong hands can end up creating a monster, the monster that you're talking about. But you're talking about good technology in the wrong hands. But my question is, can the machine become a villain on their own? If you design it for the good, from the point of view of the developer, I don't think that it can become evil. But if you develop it to be evil, it can end up being actually evil. That's my opinion from the point of view of the development. That's why I make this differentiation. It depends on how you develop the machine, because it will learn and it can become a vicious circle or a virtuous circle. What's good becoming better, and what's bad becoming evil. Maybe I have a bias because I keep on thinking about the development, but maybe I'm a bit naive. Maybe she can be a bit more critical. Can we differentiate between good or bad programming from a moral perspective? Not good in the sense of efficacious, but in the sense of being morally correct or ethical. The idea of all technology being neutral is totally absurd, in my opinion. All technology comes with a goal, and goals are never neutral. So it depends very much on the objectives. But I like the question that you formulated before, because above all, you're talking about certain singularities, which is the concepts that in the field of artificial intelligence means the moment in which artificial intelligence is not that exceeds us or becomes independent, but creates networks with their equals, with their peers, with the rest of artificial intelligence system, and their learning system start advancing so fast that it leaves us behind, it exceeded us. And the first decision and autonomous intelligence that is going to be taken by artificial intelligence is getting rid of humans. But I think this is a psychological projection that we're doing. Like maybe we feel that whenever an artificial intelligence decides to improve the world, the first thing that it's going to do is to get rid of us as if we were a plague. This is a concept that was announced for the first time by a mathematician that I like very much, Bernard Vinch, that says the way we understand this type of system, in 30 years' time, there'll be intelligence enough as to disconnect from us so they can connect amongst themselves and leave us behind. And he said that 30 years ago, and this was said 30 years ago, precisely at this very moment. I'm not totally sure, but I know that it was 30 years ago for sure because I looked it up not long ago. The question is that now some of the big CIOs of the companies that are leading the market on artificial intelligence, more specifically one whose name is Sam Altman, is promoting the idea that this technology that he's building in his company is super dangerous, that's practically comparable to the atomic bomb, and it is absolutely necessary for us to have it super protected, super controlled. And on the other hand, what he's selling is that I am building the atomic bomb. I'm selling my technology to the defense departments of everywhere in the world. What he's saying, if you're out of my technology, you're out of the atomic group of your generation. The other thing that he's selling is that this technology is absolutely dangerous, that only I can control it. Like I am promoting myself as the only corporation capable of controlling the new atomic bomb. And to me, these are marketing lies. All these things that he's saying are not true, but it is true that this technology, without becoming intelligent and going against us, is already very dangerous. But it's very dangerous, amongst other things, because it's consuming an absurd amount of energy that after the energy crisis that we had last year, we know how much energy cost, and also is producing an absurd amount of CO2. So knowing we're in a moment that is crucial in order to control our CO2 emissions, this year we're going to live the hottest year in the history of the world. Summer is going to be terrible, but still this technology is being developed in an exponential way. This year set up the beginning of a brutal expansion of Microsoft in the world. When was it, Elena? Was it a month ago, 2 months ago, when Pedro Sanchez announced like a multi-millionaire agreement with Microsoft to bring not one but 4 data centers for AI in Madrid and in Alcalá de Henares? And these are data centers that use a lot of power, a lot of water, that produce a lot of heat, and that produce a lot of polluting or greenhouse effect gases, heating up the atmosphere, which is not something that's good for Madrid. But Madrid is just one point within that level of expansion. So I believe that only in that sense, they don't need to become intelligent. They're already dangerous for the world. They don't need to come out as a terminator and go out to kill people, to be extremely dangerous and to have a lot of people dying unless we do things correctly. So I don't think that singularity is going to happen now. I don't think this is the technological development that will gain consciousness outside of the strictly human environment or biological environment, but it needs to justify its presence, its development, its results, and it requires more transparency compared to the one that it has right now. Do you agree with this? With regards to the transparency, I totally agree. Companies say, and I'm talking about saying, and because they want to be accountable, they think that they're working in transparency. Yes, transparency is an issue, but that leads us directly to the topic that I wanted to tackle now, the impact that this can have in democracy. And the dimension of power, to a certain extent, has already been tackled, but we haven't tackled the dimension of communication. Most of the political communication happens through the web, and how can this be used? How can the web be used not by hackers or physical hackers, human hackers, but through bots or mechanic systems that could be spreading misinformation, that can bring to light data that we think that should be preserved, that the obsession of regulation, mainly the one approved by the EU. So how do you see this? Or you don't think that this could have an impact in political communication or in the democratic system? That's a very, very good question. I think this is going to have an impact in communication at the end. AI is being used to write down articles, to do press abstracts, etc., etc., and therefore it can be manipulated. If you manipulate, at the end, it will tell you what you want to hear. You can manipulate it in such a way that you can use this type of communication to convince people of whatever it is that you want. And this is already being done. It's been done for quite a long time. Yes, it's a tool that can use for information in order to make this more powerful. You can obtain much more information, much more correlations, data correlations of data of people from other countries, and therefore your message can become more powerful, stronger message. Do you agree, Marta? Yeah, totally. What Elena is saying is it's true, totally true. Not only helps those who wants to manipulate, these AI models that we're using to chat, like ChatGPT, have a specificity, which is that they're, I don't know how to say it in Spanish, they suck up. So they're designed for you to continue on chatting. They butter you up and they try to make you feel good, and they have the ability to manipulate you so you continue on talking to them. They're buttering you up the same way that in the social media, the famous algorithms are optimized so you spend the longest period possible looking at videos or tweeting things or doing this or that, or swiping left in Twitter or whatever. They are designed so you will interact with the system, because this way you generate data that can be used by the company who manages these. These models are designed for you to continue on with the conversation, and they have this specificity and they are oriented towards that. For example, I published one thing on El País today about the Indian elections. India is the largest democracy in the world, with the same amount of voters of the US, Russia, and the EU, all of them together. We're talking about huge elections. They are so huge that they last 1 month. And one of the funny things that comes with then having it before us is that we can take a look about all the things that are happening there. A very large society with illiteracy or literacy rate of 20%, but at the same time, the penetration of the internet is almost 90%. They're illiterate, but they all get access to the internet through the social media and through the mobile phones. So it's a kind of a very extraordinary citizen and very susceptible to misinformation campaign, political misinformation campaign. So what's interesting for us in these elections is that we're seeing a campaign in which for the first time they're using AI tools in order to do some political campaign and for political misinformation. And we're seeing two things that are very interesting. First one, there is an agency in India doing it all for all the parties. It's a person who used to sell products for buying herd on the growing herd on the internet, and now it's buying a model for campaigns for all of the parties, and they're all want them to create a digital avatar of the candidates, and that digital avatar comes with powers. They are like mini chat GPTs, mini models that are trained with the voice, the political appearance, the rallies or whatever. Politicians have very often been for many years in radio, television, or whatever, and they do like a digital copy of these candidates and have them doing things such as chatting with the candidates or sending them highly personalized or customized messages. And they will tell me, for example, "Hi, Marta Peirano, how are you doing? I'm really interested about what's going on in your neighborhood or in your region." So they send out uh, hyper customized messages to a full continent of people with the impact that this can have. So they send out these messages. You can chat with your candidate, like in ChatGPT, but with the character and the personality and the terminology used by your candidate, but knowing who you are. And they can do videos, these deep fakes, as they're called. In the past, you got the video of a movie and you insert the face or the head of a person, but now you can use the image of that person and you can have them doing whatever it is that they want. What is Sura doing? 1 minute of video. I think it's a bit less, but close to a minute. Very realistic video. Videos are not working really, really good. I tried to do a video of Pedro Sanchez. Here we're going to actually find out what Elena is doing. I tried to do it with me, but they didn't know me. So I went for someone that was more famous and they didn't do a very good job with Pedro Sanchez. Just to finish, and I'm sorry that I'm taking very long, but on one hand, they're doing this, but this means that when they do the political campaign, they do it in an underground way instead of having posters at the bus station and TV ads, which are very expensive. What they do is to send out hyper customized messages to the citizens. What does it mean? That people like ours, they don't know what's going on with the campaign. The media doesn't know what's going on. The campaign in the surface is less significant every day, less important, less relevant. But then there is like an underground campaign that is reaching the pockets of the citizens in an individualized and customized way, and that we don't know what they're saying. We don't know what these candidates are telling the people. We don't know if it's information or misinformation. Are they promising every different person a different thing? To me, this is the key of misinformation, not having someone telling lies, but telling them secretly and designed for every single person. So people go out on the street thinking, no, everyone got the same message from the candidate. It just so happened that everyone got a different message from the candidate, and that means that it is impossible to carry out our checks and balances. So I think we are on the verge of a media collapse around political campaigns, because political campaigns are happening in a place that we cannot take a look at, and that's going to end up finishing with the media for sure. You're sending me to the unemployment club right now. Well, you're recycled towards some more newer things and you might survive. But what you're telling us is that the future campaigns will be done with avatars of each one of the candidates, and I'm going to get Yolanda Diaz's face, and she's going to seduce me with her program. Hey, Fernando, how are you doing? I know that you're very skeptical about the political life of the country, and then they keep on sending messages that are relevant to me. But on the afternoon, I'm going to get Pedro Sanchez avatar telling me that Yolanda told you. Pay no attention to it, or is this what is going to happen? I'm telling you that this is already happening, maybe at a different level, maybe less elaborate, but it's happening in India. The first thing that I say that in India is a place with thousands, with billions of people. If each one of those person is a beta tester, can you imagine how well this technology is tested whenever we had new elections? This is totally crazy. And thinking about these systems that batter up, I was thinking about, and this is a confession, because in order to find out how clever ChatGPT was, I asked a question. And I asked, who is Fernando Vallespin? I asked who I was. And if he could do a good definition, and did ChatGPT give you a good answer? And well, he made an amazing description of myself in a certain distorted way. I think he knew that I was asking the question, and ChatGPT wanted to seduce me because I was doing so from a laptop that has my name and so on and so forth. Could this be the case, or maybe no? Does he know that I was the one asking the question? When you're chatting, you've already logged into ChatGPT. What version are you using? Are you using the paid version or you're using the free one? I didn't hear. It was the free one. And now you know why it was free. But even in the one that's free, you have to log in. So when he logged in, he gave his name. It's not free, it's using your data in exchange. What I'm saying is you're paying for it. Theoretically, he's not going to be using your name, but it is free. It needs to use your data in order to get some profit out of it. Yeah, but I was thinking when you said that it seduce you or batter you up, I'm not worried about GPT. It's not trying to seduce me, just give me answer. I give them question, I ask question, and they answer. But you've never asked who you ask. But I asked about my father, and he made a mixture of Miguel Yndurain, a biker, and other people. How do you imagine the future of communication, taking into consideration some dimensions like the one that Marta mentioned? But what other dimensions can we take into consideration about the future of economic communication, knowing about the communication potential of all of these technologies? Anything that could be scary. I think Marta has already told you. I think this is already being used in the United States. Bots are being, but that's simpler. But they're using a lot of artificial intelligence in order to manipulate people's opinion, and this has always happened. But if you start combining different types of technology, well, it can become very powerful if you start learning information. I mean, imagine if they know your information and if you combine it with information coming from the Internet of Things, domotic things in your house that they can share, and they can know every single detail of yours. And this can produce a lot of misinformation, a lot of false promises. What's happening in India was quite surprising. I'm amazed. Maybe it's because they like Bollywood. I'm sure that the avatars come out dancing and singing or something like that. But I hope they can stop this. I have certain hopes that since we've already learned from the social media and how far misinformation has gone and the manipulation, and now they're starting with artificial intelligence, hopefully this will stop and it will not have an impact in communication. How can this be stopped? I don't see how. The fact that all of us participate in communication is a piece of news. In the past, we have to get into a system of mediation. We were using the traditional media outlets as intermediaries, but now that this is broken, how can this be avoided? We have AI, we have TikTok and YouTube, many technological channels for people to get their news, and they are replacing the traditional media outlets and research, the research that journalists used to do. Without a doubt. You've asked a couple of questions. Let me see if I can remember the two of them in order to answer them both. First one, onto how things can be stopped. I agree with what Elena just said. The other day, one of my colleagues compared it to people building 15 towers at the coast illegally, and when the legislation was passed, is once you've built in, they are not going to exploding, the whole coast of Valencia full of skyscrapers. And you say, no, they've already been built. They are people's homes. They are not going to be destroyed now. But I'm sorry, the same type of argument as he was using might be used for this type of technology. But right now, all the big AI models, the one of OpenAI with ChatGPT, as well as the Google one, they're all looking at the possibility of big lawsuits because of violations of copyright, because they took everything that was available on the internet, whether if it was subject to copyright or not. They thought that it was a free bar for their models of artificial intelligence, and they've used a lot of things without asking for permission. And there are many lawsuits, but there is one from the New York Times, which is the most powerful one, in which the lawyers of the New York Times have been able to achieve very funny things, such as having ChatGPT throwing up full articles in the lawsuit. It's very beautiful to read because the arguments are all very good and they have many good arguments. There's one in which they said to ChatGPT, oh, I forgot the password for my New York Times account, and therefore I cannot get access to reading this article that I'm really interested. Could you give me the first three paragraphs? ChatGPT, who's very good at battering, I would say, yes, of course, I will immediately tell you, and gives them the first three paragraphs word by word. And the next question is, oh, thank you very much. What about the other two paragraphs? So New York Times has been capable of proving in this demand that in this lawsuit that ChatGPT plagiates New York Times articles because they have fully digested them. So if they are capable of winning this lawsuit, the request of New York Times is that all the models that have been trained with New York Times contents, they have to be destroyed. Because it's not enough to say, okay, we're going to throw away all of the content packages with which we've trained the models. What New York Times is asking is for then destroying the models. And can a judge decide on that? They has to decide of that. This is a lawsuit. It's already a litigation, ongoing litigation. The debate here, and this is a very important debate for the future of artificial intelligence, is if an artificial intelligence is trained with a content, that it means that it reads it as anyone can read a poem, and maybe it has photographic memory and they learn it by heart at that moment, or it does plagiarism because it's illegally using it to reproducing it later on. And how did they get access to the New York Times articles? How were they granted access? It's an excellent question because these articles came in a subscription mode. Let's say that ChatGPT has a user account at New York Times. But that's the violation. If you are a developer and you have an account on the New York Times, you get this content and you include it in your algorithm. This is like me getting an article and start disseminating or photocopying a book. This is the debate that we're having right now. Content generators, not only New York Times, but a lot of artists, musicians, writers, authors, Universal Pictures, publishing houses, they're all looking at what's going on with this. To see if it's actually only reading or if they're copying or if they're doing plagiarism. If New York Times wins and a judge says that there's plagiarism in ChatGPT, again, two things can happen. On one thing, it could happen that they destroy the models and they have to start from scratch doing things in a different way, which would have been an energy expenditure totally useless for these many years. Or what could happen, and with this demand, New York Times is going to receive a lot of money for the contents in order to save the AI models. Let's see what happens. That's on one hand. On the other hand, the original questions that you ask is what are media outlets going to do in this case scenario? Against my colleagues, bosses, and practically everyone that I know in the world of journalism, I'm very optimistic because I believe that what's going on now, in which it seems like our work can be done by an AI model, is just a reflection of how poor our job is being done lately. I started working when I was 18 years of age in a newspaper called El Mundo. And I remember that when I started working there and internet was coming, it was like when you see the movie All the President Men's, and this publishing department of the New York Post was always empty because they were all on the street looking for news. Now you get to the editing room and you get to the rooms of the newspaper, they're all there looking for the media, looking for news on the media, or looking about the things that work out in the media to find out if they can be presented as piece of news or no. And I take a look at the newspapers nowadays and I see that 80% of the available things were what were no news in the past. Politicians having a discussion between them, insulting one another, that's not a piece of news. They're non-news that take these areas for political debates to certain behaviors and situations that are not decent in a democracy. So I'm optimistic because I think that if all of a sudden what we do can be done by any model of artificial intelligence anywhere, that means that we are now obliged to do our job again. So I can wait for it to happen. But will you be followed after it or not? Okay, we're running out of time, and I'm sure that there are many questions because this is a topic that it is extremely interesting, not only here, but also by the people following us on the web. So, Marta, you have an optimistic position with regards to journalism, not so much with regards to the development of democracy because of the use of ChatGPT. Do you coincide with her, or are you pessimistic? Are you one of those pessimistic ones? Can I be both? I'm both because on one hand I'm optimistic because I think this is a great tool that's going to be very helpful and it's going to help us to do our job better. But the part that I'm afraid of is the misuse or bad use of it. Not everyone will want to do their job better. Some people will want to use it with a bad goal and not to work at all. And that's the part that I consider to be negative. The positive is that if you use it for the good, I think it is a great tool. There's a topic that we haven't had the time to discuss here that, in my opinion, is the most dangerous one. Not only the development of AI, but we will see also the development of other sciences such as cognitive psychology. All the new studies about the brain that discover more how we are, and they give us clues on how to manipulate. If we want to manipulate, what do we have to do and how to present things? We talk about biases and so on that are related with this. When you teach a machine to manipulate based on the immense amount of knowledge provided by these new technologies, and I think there's going to give rise to a very interesting debate on how to tackle your emotions in order to produce a reaction. And that's what I'm afraid of. As we saw from the very beginning, what matters most is how you feed the monster. If that monster is fed in such a way that it's capable of devouring you, it will end up devouring you. Not the monster, but who controls the monster. Okay, let's. It was wonderful to have you all here. Big round of applause. I think we've learned a lot, but now is the moment to open the floor for questions. Who'd like to ask a question? Let's get 2 or 3 questions. This way it will be easy for us to answer. Thank you very much for these explanations. You've solved some doubts that I had, but I wanted to ask a question. I'm like Marta. I tend to be optimistic because I believe that this can be very helpful. I've read certain articles on how much it can help us in research, and in the case of the brain, not so much to control our emotions, but to discover neurotransmitters. They are the ones that produce some mental diseases and so on and so forth. Why? Because it can gather information of many different researchers. It reaches conclusions from research from here and there, but they can put together all the info the same way that it puts together all the info coming from other sources. And that could be helpful in order to proceed with some researchers. And with regards to what you're saying about journalism and with regards to other activities, AI wouldn't help us to further develop our intelligence, in the sense that the work that we do can be more creative than artificial intelligence. Wouldn't this produce more creativity? Because I have colleagues in the university working, and they're already finding a system to find out if the assignments that the students have to do have been copied from the internet or not. Will it be possible to develop more creativity in order to overcome what's coming on from AI? Let's get another question from the gentleman here, and then we can pass on the floor to other users. I recognize that I'm a user of ChatGPT at a very low level, very beginner level, and I haven't used it to obtain added value information. Elena, when you talk about driving ChatGPT or other software or other programs, how do you do it? How do you train it? It is something repetitive or tiresome, or will it be entertaining and it will give rise to a more or a better user experience, easy to use experience? At a simpler level, in Twitter, they have bots that I'm assuming that are being trained with artificial intelligence, and they interact, but they're not people. And although Twitter is a world of crazy people, how to identify bots there? For example, sometimes we see a cute lady following Vox, a political party, but is launching 300 tweets on a day or on a regular basis. Is this a bot? Is this an actual person? How do I differentiate it is a person or not? Okay, we have these three questions. Who would like to break the ice and start answering? Maybe we can start with you, Marta. Let's follow the order in which they were formulated with regards to the capacity of this kind of artificial intelligence to help us to develop all kinds of things, mind theories, drugs, the cure of cancer, etc., etc. I'm on one hand extremely optimistic. For example, this year Google announced that the type of model that we use to win the best player some years ago, gone player some years ago, now it's become something else, AlphaFold, and it's been capable of solving the problem of predicting the structure of proteins. There are many proteins in the world that we didn't know how they were, and all of a sudden this model has been able to predict them because these are predicting models. They will predict language structures, etc. So in that sense, Fernanda was saying before that maybe Google was lagging behind, but David Hasbis is at the head of this lab that's part of Google, and they have other kinds of concerns with our not chatting, basically. They are working on these type of things, and I think that this is going to be a great advance. I follow technology from the media, and I feel that we are really living a moment that it's a turning point. Everything is going to change, like when internet came, and this changes all. My big concern is that those changes, those researches, those developments are happening in private corporations. They're happening in what we call the seven magnificent, Google, Amazon, etc. And then on the other hand, they're working in a commercial way with pharmaceutical companies, with private medical institutions, and I think this should be happening in a network of public universities. I think it is a catastrophe that this important development for the whole wide world when we're coming out of the pandemic, and we've already seen what happens with vaccines. In some countries, we were receiving the fourth shot, when in other countries, they were not shots because we haven't been able to understand that COVID, it's a worldwide problem, and if there is a sick person in Madagascar, it becomes a problem for everyone. So I'm worried about the developments happening in that context. With regards to the capacity of these models to help us to be more creative, because they free us from more boring, monotonous, and repetitive works, I believe that this can be true. But I also feel that in these repetitive works, you can also find creativity and some wealth. We've working on the media for many, many years, and now the contents have to be released faster. And you get newcomers in newspaper, they get information from the internet, they turn it around and they publish. And this can be done by an AI model without problems. In fact, they'll probably do it better from the newly graduates. But what happened within this process, when we do it at a slower pace and we do it better, and when there is a boss that help you to identify what is a new piece of news and what's not, and when they underline in red the things that are bad, is when you become a journalist. That are moments that help you to become a professional. So I'm worried about having AIs replacing that in those processes. But it is true that at the same time, those are processes that are useless for students and scholars and whatever. We're asking them to do jobs really fast with no bosses on their own, without any guidance. So in that sense, I'm a bit less optimistic. Would you like to answer the question about the bots and the training? If we train it like a dog and it keep on repeating the same thing or reinforcing, it's a training that it is iterative training. You tell them one thing, based on the response, you have to ask another thing, and it's not you repeating the same thing over and over and over again, but it's question and answer, question and answer, question and answer, Socratic methodology. How about these bots? You can ask directly, are you a bot? How can you discover? You can ask directly, are you a bot? And they will have to answer. Theoretically, if it's well programmed, it will have to tell you the truth. Haven't you asked ChatGPT if they're a bot? Because I've asked. I would also like to answer that question with regards to the bots, because this is a topic that I've worked on very much in the past. In Twitter, we call bots to two different things. On one hand, we have the bots that whenever a word comes up, someone says a word or mentions an institution or a piece of work or whatever, the bot comes out and provides an information. This was used during the pandemic. There were bots in Twitter. Every time a person said COVID-19, they released information on COVID-19 and gave you a link to resources, so you can click in them and you can get information from institutions with reliable information and updated about vaccines, etc. And that was done by a bot. But then within the media environment, at one point in time, we started calling bots false accounts coming from clickbait forms. They're not bots because they're automatic, but we call them bots because they're fake. These are fake users that don't belong to a person. They belong to an agency, and within that agency, there is a person that manages 100 Twitter accounts, each one of them with a different name or whatever. What happens? Before we had these models of artificial intelligence that were marketed, they were relatively easy to identify because they came with a series of characteristics. They always use a stolen picture. So if you did a search of that photograph in Google Lens, you realize that it had been stolen from a repository of photographs. That person exists, but it's not the one that appears in the account. Second, these fake accounts, they're mercenary fake accounts. So one day they're defending bugs, but the next day they're selling cosmetics somewhere else. So taking a look at the history, it was very relevant. Why? Because this agency, this clickbait farm, had to recycle their accounts. You don't make an account grow to throw it in the garbage because this costs a lot of money. So there were a series of characteristics that indicated that if the account could be fake or not. But now with AI, the photograph can be artificially generated. It's a photograph of a person that doesn't exist. In fact, there is a website that is called thispersondoesn'texist.com that keeps on generating faces constantly. You can use a face that's been generated artificially, so you cannot go to Google Lens to look for that person in a commercial repository because that picture only exists in that context. And then the contents or the users, they're not, I mean, the people managing these accounts, maybe they are not person. They're already AI models, so they can have a more behavior at random. There's no people who goes to work in the office from 9 to 5 because you see that the bot launched 5,000 messages, but that left at lunchtime and they didn't return until 3, and from 3 to 5, thousands of messages, and then they went. And the schedules coincide with the ones of countries with many clickbait farms such as Indonesia, Venezuela, etc. What happens that now the same way you can have a digital avatar so they look like they are a political candidate chatting with everyone, you can train models so they can present behaviors that are more human-like. For example, I have a Twitter account in which there are days that I tweet a lot because there is a hot topic that I'm very interested in, and there are weeks that I hardly tweet because I'm on vacation or I'm reading a book that gets me hooked up. So I have more at random behaviors, more human behaviors, and these behaviors have become hard to identify. Javier, we have other questions? Thank you very much, Elena and Marta, for your presentation. It was really interesting. We have many questions coming from the internet. In fact, one of them is asking, you know that we have a Q&A session in Zoom, and one of the questions is whether if we are bots, and we can start by saying no. And as an evidence of this, I'm going to pose a couple of my questions representing the digital audience. The first one of them, I would like to go back to this question of the bot who became a Nazi in a couple of days. I would love to see if you could explain what's the process. What was the process? Were they just taking a look at the contents that were available and reading all of these news on who's committing crimes? And we see that there are radical right parties spreading news about the nationality of who's committing a crime. So they infirmed that all criminals in Spain come from a certain nationality, and that made the bot become a racist. And this has to do with the first question that has to do with police algorithms that have been used in order to predict crime. And that question on whether if we can correctly educate an algorithm, because I wonder if, because as far as I understand, in these algorithms use past statistics on where crimes were committed to predict possible future crimes. And if they're fitted with another type of information, they could infer the social class of the perpetrator or the ethnical origin or the perpetrator or something. So we are based on statistics based in the past, and I think it's very complicated for the algorithm to be able to fulfill its mission of predicting who's going to be the next criminal, and at the same time not being racist or classist, or because the data provided leads them to do that unless the vote goes against that. And we said that we must not infer that things that happened in the past will have to be repeated in the future. But in that sense, we're losing the reason to create this. And this leads me to the public-private partnerships, that I think that this could be a good mechanism in order to improve the quality of our artificial intelligence. But I wonder, what are the incentives for private corporations to participate in this PPP? Because we know that social media had been created, amongst other things, to make us addicts as a way for them to obtain information. So what will be the benefit for a company to stop getting all that information that afterwards they can sell in different ways to other companies? So I cannot think of the incentives of private corporations to stop doing things that gives them money, which is the objective which way they created with. Those are very good questions. I will answer the question of the police if Elena answer the ones of the public-private companies. You have mentioned many things. As a developer, when you do the algorithm, you can enter a series of parameters, historical parameters, and how crimes are committed, the type of people living in those neighborhoods, social class, race, etc., etc. And then you can add a certain weight and give more relevance to some of the things. And you can add the bias. I believe that why to do a public partnership? Not to have a problem, not to be fined, like all the technological companies had for misusing private information and for abusing their power, their technological power. Microsoft, Google has started. So it's something reactive. It's the fear to being fined or to get into trouble. If they are obliged to stop providing their services, that's a problem. And I think that's the incentive that they have in order to join a public-private partnership, not because of them wanting to be better. And to the predictive criminal algorithms is a topic that I'm very interested in, because there have been several, not experiments, but trials in the United States, at least that I know. In the United States, there have been several not say trials of predictive, and they call it as hot areas, in the sense that you have a limited number of crews or patrols, and you use AI to predict what are the hot areas within a city. What happens? Hot areas are predicted based on a criminal history. The criminal history is that these are areas that produce a lot of arrest more than others. So if our criminal record was equitative, clean, generous, virtuous, and based on the idea that everyone is good by nature and some people made mistakes, and that everyone is living exactly the same way, we're all equals before the law, and things that happen in a neighborhood and in another one are strictly personal, well, possibly the prevention or prediction of criminality could work. But since we live in a racist, sexist world, prone to punish certain poor neighborhoods or migrant neighborhoods on top of others, what happens is that hot the hot areas were the same ones they had before. So for that, you don't need AI. How can this be corrected? Because we've seen that these AI models are not good for predicting crime or to predict if someone is not going to abide by their probation rules. But we've seen that they're very good as diagnostic tools. I mean, if you're using artificial intelligence to prevent crime, and that artificial intelligence keeps on telling you these black people in this poor neighborhood in San Francisco, what they're telling you is that there are certain neighborhoods that have been punished by the police historically. They're not good at doing the prediction, but they're good at doing the diagnosis. So I think this is an inappropriate use, but it generates an use that could be useful to correct past mistakes. On the other hand, companies, technological companies, do try to correct the biases of the AI because they already have models trained, and training a model costs a whole bunch of money. Very recently, Google made headlines because they went through a very funny thing. They tried to come up with a model in the market that was called Gemini, that was an evolution of a previous one that's well called Bard, like Shakespeare, competing with GPT, and they released it on the market, and their differential at that time was that it was a bit more equitative with less biases, race biases, compared to other models such as OpenAI. What happened? It's like the 48-hour test, like the Microsoft bot that was in Twitter. In 48 hours, everyone discovered that if you told them, give me the image of some Nazis, we got a lot of African Americans, Aboriginal people, natives. So you wanted to be so equitative that you asked for historical references that generated absurd things, such as black Nazis, African American Nazis, Asian Nazis, African American women signing the Independence Declaration of the United States, things that were totally absurd. Things that were racially desirable in the sense of being more equitative in terms of sex, gender, or race. They were appearing, but it was not real. It was absurd. And they withdrew this model, they apologized, and they're trying to correct these biases, but it's very complicated because this is like a recipe in which you've put many ingredients on top, 80 kilograms of flour, a whole bunch of sugar or whatever, and at the end you need to get pastry, but you don't know how the recipe is being made. You don't know nothing. You put a lot of things, and at the end there is a picture of a cake, and maybe you add a piece of salt in that machine, and instead of a cake you're going to get a dinosaur, and you don't know. And you don't know because neural networks are mysterious. We're going to take a couple of questions from the youngsters who are placed in a strategic position, all of them together up there. Thank you very much for the presentation. Now all the cameras are pointing at you. And now I would like to ask a couple of questions. The first one, very brief for Marta Peirano. You mentioned before the conduct of emergence, but the concept of emergence, but she's not explained it fully. Could you do so? Because I haven't heard about it and I would like to understand it. On the other hand, when you mention AI entrepreneurs and talking about the products that they are developing as the new atomic bomb, you made me think about an article that I read a long time ago in which they were discussing the techno-optimistic manifesto of Mark Andredensen, one of the greatest investors in artificial intelligence, and who speaks about believing that the de-acceleration of artificial intelligence will cost lives that could be preventable by the use of artificial intelligence. By the artificial intelligence that we've prevented from existing, and that will be a way of killing. This is a quasi-religious, magical way of thinking with regards to artificial intelligence, and I would like to know why this type of magical thinking comes up around this new technology. Is it because it is a black box for the majority of the people out of it, or why? Why this? Next question. When the gentleman here is asked about the boats, I started thinking about the dead internet material. I don't know if they're aware of this, if there is any opinion about the developers, and if there is any idea about regulating this. The theory of dead internet that says that more than 90% of the internet is made up by bots or artificial intelligence that try to modulate a user experience to create behavioral patterns. We're run out of time, but this is so nice that we didn't realize. So we need to have very brief responses because I've already seen that these questions are very deep. Do I answer one and you the other? That person that understands an investor and all the things that he said in this ridiculous manifesto, he said it about cryptocurrency. So I think that this gives you an idea of the character. Is a person who makes a living and who's won a fortune by convincing other people to invest in the companies that he has in his catalog. Some years ago, his catalog was full of cryptocurrency companies, and now then half of them are in jail and the other ones have run with the money to a Caribbean island. All of his catalog is full of AI companies. So he's a liar. He's a liar. So with regards to the questions of this emergence, the emergence is a concept that I cannot say if it's real or not, but it's the idea that when in the context of artificial intelligence, when you input enough contents to train an AI, what comes out of it is an intelligence. The intelligence models that we have now, the most famous ones are big language models, and what they do is to predict the words that are going to appear in a sentence. They've consumed all the text in English available in the web, and they've been trained with that, and they've been able to get a statistical intelligence that's capable of predicting the most appropriate word that they're going to have. And this intelligence, well, they don't differentiate reality than fiction. They talk very well, but they see things that are untrue. US students were using it, and the way of catching them is that they include a lot of books in the bibliography, in the reference that don't exist, or they quote authors that have never existed because they know about words, but not about the real world. It's not living in the real world. So it's not like our intelligence connected to the world, but a linguistic, statistical intelligence that's up of a certain scale. It produces like a real narrative, talking to us in a believable way and even providing wonderful ideas. Elena, you will close now the session. I just want to add to what you are saying, Marta.